Putin has ordered a retreat, 22,000 Russian soldiers stranded in the middle of hell, no way forward. The announcement did not come in a Kremlin bulletin, nor in a carefully prepared press release, but the effect on the battlefield speaks louder than any official words could. Along a broken arc of villages stretching from Novopetrokivka in the south to the battered outskirts of Pokrovsk in the north, entire Russian units have found themselves cut off, disconnected, and locked in positions that are neither sustainable nor defensible. The numbers themselves are staggering. Independent assessments confirm that as many as 22,000 Russian troops, drawn from elements of the 41st Combined Arms Army, 2 brigades of Marines, and attached motorized rifle regiments, are now trapped in a corridor whose flanks are collapsing faster than Moscow can reinforce them. In Russian official language, these are not trapped troops, but forward defense units reorganizing into secondary lines. On the ground, however, reality is merciless. Trenches that were once prepared as staging points are now functioning as prison walls. Every kilometer of open field between these units and their fallback lines has been turned into a kill zone, saturated with drones, artillery, and FPV strikes. The situation worsened when Ukraine's deep strikes severed 2 primary supply arteries that connected the forward Russian spearhead to its logistics hubs. The first blow came with the confirmed destruction of the M14 corridor east of Velika Novosilka, where repeated precision strikes demolished a succession of bridges and culverts. The second came days later north of Marinka, when Ukrainian sabotage units infiltrated under cover of night and collapsed a vital railway embankment that had been moving ammunition forward in bulk. From that moment on, fuel and shells had to be pushed through unpaved tracks in civilian trucks, which fell prey to relentless drone reconnaissance. What was initially described by Russian commanders as a temporary interruption has become a chronic paralysis. With every passing day, the stranded units burn through their remaining supplies, their artillery batteries reduced to firing no more than 2 to 3 shells per gun per day. The tactical picture around these stranded forces illustrates how the concept of retreat has shifted from theory to harsh inevitability. In Andriivka and Kindratove, Russian defensive positions were abandoned after Ukrainian FPV swarms penetrated trench networks and disabled command posts. The pattern was the same in Oleksivka and Bezoleykabe. No decisive tank battles, no armored thrusts, but slow, grinding pressure from drones and small infantry assault groups that rendered holding the villages untenable. This wave of localized withdrawals created a domino effect. Each retreat shortened the Russian line, but also concentrated its forces into shrinking pockets, thereby increasing the density of Ukrainian strikes against them. The Kremlin's language of regrouping cannot conceal what this is, a forced pullback under relentless pressure. The evidence became impossible to hide on June 14th, when President Zelensky announced in his evening address that Andriivka had been recaptured. This was not just a symbolic settlement, but a node that disrupted Russian infiltration routes and resupply patterns. Within hours, influential Russian military bloggers, many with direct ties to frontline officers, corroborated the loss, confirming that Marines of the 155th Brigade had pulled back. For once, Ukrainian claims and Russian unofficial sources aligned, creating a unified narrative of retreat. From there, the pattern repeated, each loss feeding into the next, each abandoned position eroding the illusion of an intact buffer zone. On July 27th, when Kindratov's liberation was confirmed by both local Ukrainian authorities and the Ministry of Defense, the situation reached a tipping point. What had been framed as tactical adjustments now appeared as a collapsing front. Less than 2 weeks later, on August 10th, Ukrainian forces raised their flag in Bezoleyka, broadcasting footage of exhausted Russian troops fleeing on foot under drone surveillance. These cascading withdrawals shattered Moscow's stated objective of constructing a buffer zone along the Sunniite axis. To establish a buffer, one must not only advance, but sustain forward positions against counter-pressure. Russia failed in both tasks. Every lost trench became a Ukrainian launch pad, every abandoned bunker a supply depot for counterattacks. By August, analysts no longer asked if the buffer zone would hold, they asked how far Russia would be forced to fall back before its lines stabilized. The picture worsened further around Novosilka, where reports indicated that Russian ground forces had been pushed east of the village after counterattacks collapsed their forward salient. The corridor between Berlotska and Prevenjel became a nightmare zone of contested fields, shifting hands multiple times, but never offering Russia the permanence it needed. What was once Moscow's summer offensive had turned into an elaborate exercise in trading space for time. Every kilometer gained in the spring was lost under the weight of Ukrainian counterpressure by midsummer, and in Pokrovsk, the supposed centerpiece of Russian operations, weeks of heavy assaults yielded only a handful of blocks on the city's edge. Ukrainian defenders, fortified with trenches, bunkers, and a lattice of drone jammers, held their ground. For Russia, the cost was brutal. Dozens of tanks lay charred on approach routes, hundreds of infantrymen left in fields that their commanders could not retrieve. Despite weeks of bombardment, despite saturation fire, the city refused to fall. It became a quagmire, draining men and material that Russia could ill afford to lose.
Meanwhile, reports of mass absenteeism within Russian units began to surface. Independent legal statistics revealed that over 20,000 cases of unauthorized absence or desertion had been recorded in 3 years, most of them concentrated during high-pressure campaigns like the current one. This was not merely a morale issue, but a logistical one. Units could not maintain rotation schedules, fatigue mounted. Trenches that should have been manned by fresh replacements remained filled with the same soldiers for months. The system strained and cracked. Drones amplified the strain. Ukrainian FPVs flew constantly, their whine becoming the psychological soundtrack of the battlefield. Concealment became impossible. Even moving from trench to trench during daylight invited annihilation. Russian units responded with makeshift solutions, motorbike teams darting between cover, buggy-mounted squads attempting rapid infiltration, but the density of Ukrainian sensors and firepower made these efforts temporary at best. Each failure etched itself into the broader pattern: retreats under fire, abandoned positions, shortened lines. The crisis of the 22,000 stranded troops is best understood within this broader dynamic. Cut off from arterial resupply, hemmed in by collapsing flanks, and harassed relentlessly by precision strikes, they face a slow strangulation. Moscow cannot acknowledge their plight openly. To admit they are stranded would be to admit defeat. Instead, official narratives speak of flexible defense and redeployment, but soldiers on the ground know the truth. They have no way forward. They cannot push deeper without tanks, fuel, and shells. They cannot hold their ground indefinitely under drone fire, and falling back requires crossing open terrain under constant surveillance. The corridor has become a death trap. Every attempt at withdrawal risks turning into a rout. Ukrainian artillery is zeroed in, drone operators track movements night and day. Casualty evacuation has become nearly impossible. Units dig deeper into their foxholes hoping for relief that does not come. British Defense Intelligence estimated that Russia gained up to 550 square kilometers during June and July, largely around Donetsk. But such statistics conceal more than they reveal. What use are kilometers gained if they cannot be held? What is the value of a buffer zone if every node in it is vulnerable to drone swarms? This is the paradox of Moscow's summer offensive. It advanced on paper but retreated in reality. The official map glows red with claimed territory, but the ground itself tells another story. Scorched vehicles, abandoned trenches, villages changing hands in days, these are the true markers of the campaign. For Ukraine, each recapture, no matter how small, provides not just terrain but momentum, morale, and proof that Russia's war machine can be stalled. The stranded Russian forces are paying the price for Moscow's contradictions. Ordered to hold a line that cannot be held, they bleed daily without reinforcement. Fuel drums run empty. Ammunition crates sit bare, drone batteries outlast human endurance. Each week brings new reports of units falling back under cover of darkness, leaving behind weapons they cannot carry. Each abandoned position strengthens Ukraine's hand. And yet, still, the Kremlin insists on its narrative of control, of planned redeployment, of advancing toward strategic goals. The soldiers know better. They are stranded in the middle of hell, surrounded by fire, cut off from relief, waiting for an order that can either doom them to annihilation or permit them the dangerous gamble of retreat. Around Pokrovsk, the front demonstrates the same contradiction on a smaller scale. Russian forces pound the city with artillery, glide bombs, and armored pushes, yet remain unable to break the defensive ring. Each attempt to surge forward ends with units pinned in rubble, picked apart by drones or counter barrages. For Ukraine, holding the city is not just tactical, but symbolic. Pokrovsk serves as a logistical hub linking key roads, and its coal and industrial facilities give it strategic weight. By stalling Russia there, Ukraine ties down thousands of enemy troops that might otherwise reinforce the collapsing northern axis. Every day the city holds, the encircled Russian formations remain trapped. This is why analysts increasingly describe Pokrovsk as both a fortress and a graveyard. The morale effect cannot be overstated. Russian units expected swift gains, promised that the buffer zone strategy would provide them rest and security. Instead, they find themselves under constant assault. Trenches once thought safe are struck nightly by drones guided with thermal sensors. Fortifications collapse under precision mortar fire. Resupply convoys arrive half empty or not at all. Soldiers record desperate messages to their families, admitting that they are abandoned, their commanders powerless to extract them. Leaked intercepts reveal arguments within Russian battalion staffs, officers begging higher command for permission to fall back, only to be told to hold at all costs. This language, repeated endlessly for Moscow, has lost its authority on the battlefield. The men understand that holding at all costs often means dying without purpose. Ukraine exploits this psychological fracture. Every successful recapture, from Andriivka to Bezaleka, is broadcast quickly with imagery designed to contrast Russian silence. For every kilometer Russia claims, Ukraine shows footage of fleeing soldiers, burning equipment, or flags raised over newly liberated villages. The information war magnifies the military one. On Russian channels, silence or vague references to redeployment dominate, but the silence itself becomes incriminating. Soldiers and their families know what it means. Another retreat hidden under softer language. The cumulative effect is erosion. Erosion of trust, erosion of morale, erosion of Russia's strategic narrative. And with 22,000 troops stranded, erosion can quickly spiral into collapse if relief does not come.
Inside the Ukrainian command centers, analysts trace these Russian weaknesses with precision. Each intercept, each satellite feed, each drone reconnaissance pass adds to a mosaic of collapse. The stranded Russian forces are not merely isolated, they are being slowly mapped, targeted, and dissected. Every convoy attempting to bring them relief is shredded before it reaches the perimeter. Every attempt to rotate units in and out of the exposed salient ends with columns struck on open roads. It is a slow strangulation, but deliberate. Ukrainian strategy has shifted from frontal counterattacks to attritional warfare by precision. Where once Ukraine sought breakthroughs with armored thrusts, now it relies on grinding down the enemy's logistics until frontline positions disintegrate on their own. For the 22,000 Russian soldiers trapped, this shift means one thing: their survival clock is ticking down with each passing day. Western advisors note how this aligns with NATO doctrine. Cut off the arteries, isolate the body, and let exhaustion finish what bullets and shells began. Russia, once thought to hold an advantage in artillery firepower, now finds itself consistently outranged and outmatched in accuracy. Drones extend Ukraine's reach, enabling 155mm shells, HIMARS rockets, and precision-guided munitions to land directly on command posts, ammo dumps, and fuel reserves. The consequence is a hollowing out of Russia's offensive potential. Even if Moscow orders new attacks, the necessary logistical lifelines no longer function. Trains deliver fewer loads to forward depots. Trucks disperse under constant drone threat. Helicopters ferry supplies in small quantities, but risk being shot down. What was once a lumbering machine has become a sputtering one, grinding forward on inertia rather than momentum. For the men in the encircled zone, the reality is raw. Food rations shrink, medical kits run out. Casualties are left untreated in field stations that double as graves. Winter is looming, and trenches dug in desperation lack the insulation to withstand freezing nights. Commanders issue contradictory orders: dig deeper, hold longer, prepare for counterattacks that never materialize. The soldiers know the truth, that they are pawns in a larger game, sacrificed for propaganda headlines in Moscow. Each day of delay allows the Kremlin to broadcast another declaration of resistance or fortitude, but each day of delay also adds to the tally of the stranded. Their plight is a living contradiction, invisible in Russian media, yet painfully visible on the battlefield. Pokrovsk becomes the focal point of this contradiction. Ukrainian resistance there ties down whole brigades of Russian troops that might have been used to break the encirclement. Instead, they are bled in urban rubble, fighting block to block for territory that yields nothing but casualties. Russian commanders hoped that glide bombs and artillery would flatten Ukrainian defenses, but the city endures. Supply routes into Pokrovsk remain active through concealed roads and drone-shielded corridors. Every ton of ammunition that reaches the defenders translates into more pressure on the besieged Russian units further north. This is the strategic irony.
By defending Pokrovsk, Ukraine indirectly deepens the trap around the 22,000 stranded Russians. Inside Russia itself, the news leaks slowly. Families notice unanswered calls, social media channels whisper of mass casualties, of units wiped out without acknowledgement. Telegram groups pulse with fragments, a video from a panicked soldier describing artillery so constant that the earth shakes like water, another showing abandoned armored vehicles along dirt roads stretching to the horizon. Censors rush to delete, but the fragments spread faster than the deletions. For many Russian families, the absence of news is itself the news. If a son, brother, or husband has not called in weeks, they assume the worst. The silence from the Ministry of Defense only confirms it. Stranded soldiers become stranded stories, erased from official counts, but alive in the memories of their families and comrades. Ukraine seizes on this psychological weapon. State broadcasts emphasize not only battlefield gains, but the human cost for Russia. Clips show Ukrainian medics treating wounded prisoners, contrasting with reports of Russian units abandoning their injured. Every image is calculated to erode Russian morale further. The message is clear. Moscow cannot protect its soldiers, cannot even acknowledge them, while Ukraine exposes every detail of the war's toll. This information assault complements the battlefield assault, creating a dual encirclement, one of flesh, the other of perception. The 22,000 stranded men are trapped in both. Western analysts increasingly compare the situation to historic encirclements, Stalingrad, Debaltseve, Ilovaisk, but with a distinctly modern edge. Unlike the tank battles of the past, this encirclement is electronic, aerial, and psychological. Drones serve as scouts, killers, and broadcasters. Electronic warfare scrambles Russian communications, leaving units blind and deaf in critical moments. Precision munitions strike with surgical repetition. What once required vast armies to surround and isolate now requires an integrated network of sensors, shooters, and information warriors. The Russian soldiers know they are not facing just another army. They are facing an entire system designed to squeeze them dry. That knowledge alone corrodes their will to fight. Command friction exacerbates the chaos. Reports circulate that Russian commanders at battalion and regimental level are refusing direct orders, citing impossible conditions. Higher command threatens courts-martials, but enforcement becomes meaningless when military police cannot reach the front. Some commanders reportedly vanish, abandoning their units. Others hide in bunkers, issuing orders by radio without venturing outside. Soldiers record videos blaming not just Kiev but their own officers, accusing them of betrayal, cowardice, and incompetence. The image of Russian unity shatters under this strain. The 22,000 stranded are not just stranded physically, they are stranded institutionally, abandoned by the very chain of command meant to protect them. And still the pressure grows. Ukrainian units probe constantly, never allowing the trapped formations to rest. Nighttime raids strike supply dumps. Drone swarms hit fuel tanks. Mortar teams fire, relocate, and fire again. The cumulative effect is exhaustion beyond recovery. Even if Russia could mount a rescue, it would arrive too late for many. Already intercepted communications speak of units reduced to half strength, of companies numbering fewer than 50 men, of platoons melted into scattered survivors. Entire battalions exist only on paper, their names recorded, but their soldiers dead, wounded, or deserted. Moscow may insist the line is intact, but on the ground, the line is nothing but fragments.